Imagine pulling a single penny from your pocket and realizing it might be worth far more than 1 cent. Not because it's gold or silver, but because of what it is, when it was made, and the tiny details most people never notice. Today, we're diving into one of America's most overlooked coins, the 1991 D. Lincoln penny, a small copper-colored coin that carries a surprising story and hidden potential. This coin is the Lincoln 1 cent piece minted in 1991 at the Denver Mint, which is why you'll see a small letter D just below the date on the front. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary penny, the kind millions of people carried in their pockets during the early 1990s. But for collectors, this coin represents a fascinating moment in US coin history, and in certain conditions, or with rare errors, it can be worth far more than its face value. To understand the 1991 D penny, we need to step back to the early 1990s. America was in the middle of a period of transition. The Cold War had just ended, technology was rapidly changing, and everyday life was moving toward the digital age. But coins were still essential. Cash was king, and pennies were used constantly in stores, vending machines, and everyday transactions. The US Mint was producing billions of coins every year to keep up with demand, and the Lincoln cent was the backbone of small change in America. The Lincoln penny itself had already been in circulation for more than 80 years by 1991. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln, making it the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. By 1991, Lincoln's familiar portrait had become one of the most recognized images in American history. That year, the Denver Mint alone produced over 4 billion pennies, including the 1991 D, making it one of the most widely circulated coins of its time. But even among billions of coins, some stand out. And sometimes, what makes a coin special isn't how many were made, but how a few were made differently. Let's take a closer look at the coin itself. On the front, or obverse, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the word Liberty to the left, the date 1991 to the right, and the small D mint mark just below the date. The design is by sculptor Victor David Brenner, whose initials, VDB, appear very small at the bottom of Lincoln's shoulder. On the back, or reverse, you see the Lincoln Memorial, a design that was used from 1959 until 2008. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial, making this one of the most detailed designs ever used on a US penny. The metal composition of the 1991 D penny is also important. Unlike older pennies made mostly of copper, this coin is made of 97.5% zinc with a thin copper coating. This change happened in 1982, when rising copper prices made it too expensive to produce solid copper cents. So while the coin looks copper-colored, it's actually mostly zinc on the inside. Most 1991 D pennies are worth just 1 cent. You can find them easily in circulation, in old jars, or in rolls from banks. But collectors don't just look at face value. They look at condition, rarity, and most importantly, errors. This is where things get interesting. Because the Denver Mint produced billions of pennies in 1991, quality control was strong but not perfect. Every so often, a coin slipped through with a mistake, and those mistakes are what can turn a 1 cent coin into a collector's treasure. One of the most well-known error types for this year is the double die. This happens when the coin die strikes the design twice at slightly different angles, creating a doubling effect on letters or numbers. On a 1991 D penny, doubling might appear on the word Liberty, the date, or Lincoln's features. When strong and clear, this kind of error can be highly valuable. Another error collectors search for is the off-center strike. This happens when the blank coin planchet is not properly aligned in the press, causing part of the design to be missing. If the date and mint mark are still visible, off-center coins can be very desirable. There are also clipped planchets, where part of the coin is missing due to a cutting error in the metal sheet before striking. These coins look like they've had a bite taken out of them, and depending on how dramatic the clip is, they can be worth many times face value. Then there are die cracks, cuds, and filled dies. which create raised lines, blobs, or missing details on the coin. While some of these errors are minor, others are dramatic and collectible. But even without errors, condition matters more than most people realize. A worn 1991 D penny that's been in circulation for decades is worth only a cent, but a coin in uncirculated condition, meaning it was never used and still has its original shine, can be worth significantly more, especially if graded by a professional service. In top condition, known as mint state 67 or higher, a 1991 D penny can sell for surprising amounts. While most uncirculated examples trade for a few dollars, the very best examples have sold at auction for over $100, and in rare cases, even more, depending on eye appeal, strike quality, and demand at the time of sale. For error coins, the values climb even higher. A strong double die example from the early 1990s can sell for several $100s. Off-center strikes can range from $20 to over $200, depending on how dramatic the error is. Major mint errors with clear visual impact can go even higher, especially if they're certified and well preserved. One of the most exciting things about the 1991 D penny is that these valuable examples could still be hiding in everyday change. Unlike older coins from the early 1900s, which are rarely found in circulation today, 1991 pennies are still common in pocket change, coin jars, and bank rolls. That means anyone, anywhere, could stumble upon one of these collectible varieties. So how do you identify a real 1991 D penny and make sure it's not altered or damaged? First, check the date and mint mark. It should say 1991 with a small d beneath the date on the front. The lettering should look clean and natural, not scratched or carved. Fake mint marks are sometimes added to coins, but under magnification, these usually look uneven, raised, or glued on rather than smoothly struck into the coin. Next, look at the weight. A normal 1991 penny weighs about 2.5 grams. If it's significantly lighter or heavier, that could indicate damage, corrosion, or possibly an unusual error, which should be examined by a professional. Then inspect the surface. Genuine mint errors happen during the striking process and usually show smooth, flowing metal around the mistake. Damage that happens after the coin leaves the mint often looks rough, jagged, or inconsistent, and these coins usually aren't valuable to collectors. If you think you've found something special, it's a good idea to have the coin examined by a reputable coin dealer or sent to a professional grading service. They can confirm whether it's genuine and provide an official grade, which helps establish its market value. Now let's talk about some fun and surprising details about the 1991 D penny. First, even though billions were made, the vast majority have already been lost, damaged, or worn down over time. Coins disappear into couches, vending machines, parking meters, landfills, and forgotten drawers. Over decades, only a small percentage survive in high condition, which is why pristine examples are far more valuable than most people expect. Second, the Lincoln Memorial design on this coin is the only US coin design where the same person appears on both sides. Lincoln is on the front, and a tiny statue of Lincoln is visible inside the memorial on the back. This detail is so small that many people never notice it, even after handling thousands of pennies. Third, zinc-based pennies like the 1991 D are more vulnerable to corrosion than older copper pennies. If the copper plating gets damaged, the zinc inside reacts quickly to moisture and air, causing bubbling, swelling, and decay. That means finding a perfectly preserved 1991 penny today is harder than it sounds. Another surprising fact is that some collectors specialize in modern pennies, focusing on condition, errors, and varieties rather than age. To these collectors, a flawless 1991 D penny can be just as exciting as a rare coin from the 1800s, because perfection is harder to find than age alone. Collectors love this coin today not because it's rare in general, but because it represents opportunity. It's a reminder that valuable coins don't always come from ancient times or famous shipwrecks. Sometimes they come from everyday change, quietly waiting to be noticed. The 1991 D penny also appeals to collectors because it's affordable to enter. You don't need thousands of dollars to start collecting modern Lincoln cents. You can search rolls from banks, check your pocket change, or sort through old jars of coins, and every search brings the thrill of possibility. It's treasure hunting in the modern world. For many people, the first collectible coin they ever find is a penny. It's small, familiar, and easy to overlook. But once you discover that even a common-looking penny can hold hidden value, it changes how you see money itself. Suddenly, every coin becomes a potential story. The 1991 D penny tells a story of mass production, everyday use, and quiet survival. It passed through countless hands, stores, wallets, and cash registers, all while carrying tiny details that could someday make it special. And the fact that some of its most valuable versions are still out, that makes it even more exciting. Imagine opening an old jar of coins, sorting through hundreds of dull brown cents, and suddenly spotting something unusual. Maybe the date looks doubled. Maybe part of the design is missing. Maybe the coin shines like it just left the mint. In that moment, history and curiosity collide, and a simple penny becomes something more. That's why collectors continue to search for the 1991 D Lincoln penny today. Not because it's guaranteed to be valuable, but because it represents the thrill of discovery. It's a reminder that even the smallest objects in our everyday lives can hold secrets, stories, and unexpected worth. So the next time you get change at a store, pause for just a second before tossing those pennies aside. Look closely at the dates. Check for that tiny D mint mark. Pay attention to the details most people ignore. Because somewhere out there, one of these ordinary-looking 1991 D pennies might be extraordinary. And who knows, the next time you reach into your pocket, you might not just be holding spare change. You might be holding a hidden piece of American history, quietly waiting to be noticed. What if I told you that a single penny from the 1980s, a coin most people have spent without a second thought, could be hiding a secret worth hundreds, sometimes thousands, of dollars? Today, we're diving into the story of the 1984 no mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary at first glance, but has shocked collectors with rare errors and unexpected value. This coin is the Lincoln Memorial Cent, dated 1984 with no mint mark, which means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint. For decades, Americans have pulled these pennies from their pockets, jars, and couch cushions without realizing that some examples from this year are among the most famous error coins in modern U.S. history. While most are common, a small number have become legendary, turning everyday change into serious collector treasures. To understand why this penny matters, we need to go back to the early 1980s. The United States was dealing with rising metal costs, and the government had recently changed the composition of the penny. Before 1982, cents were made mostly of copper, but starting in late 1982, the mint switched to zinc cores with thin copper plating to save money. By 1984, this new format was fully in use, and billions of pennies were being struck every year to keep up with demand in everyday commerce. The Lincoln cent itself had already been in circulation for over 75 years by 1984. First introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it was the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. By the time the 1984 penny was made, the design on the front still showed Victor David Brenner's famous portrait of Lincoln. On the back was the Lincoln Memorial, introduced in 1959, showing the iconic building in Washington, D.C., with Lincoln's statue visible inside if you look closely. The 1984 no mint mark penny was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally does not use a mint mark on cents. That's why you won't see a letter under the date. In total, over 4 billion pennies were made in Philadelphia that year, making the standard version extremely common. Most are worth only face value today unless they are in top condition. But hidden within those billions are a few special coins that changed everything collectors thought they knew about modern pennies. Let's talk about the physical features of this coin. A normal 1984 penny weighs about 2.5 grams because of its zinc core. It has a diameter of about 19 millimeters and a smooth edge. The color is reddish-brown when new, but often turns darker over time as the copper plating ages. On the front, Lincoln faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date on the right. On the back, you see United States of America, 1 cent, and the Lincoln Memorial Building in the center. At first glance, there's nothing unusual about this coin. It blends in perfectly with other memorial cents from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. But in 1984, something extraordinary happened at the Philadelphia Mint during the coin-making process. A small number of pennies were struck with one of the most famous double die errors ever discovered on a modern US coin. This error is known as the 1984 double die obverse, often called the 1984 doubled ear penny. On these rare coins, Lincoln's ear appears doubled, almost like he has a shadow ear behind the main one. This wasn't caused by damage after the coin was made. It happened during the die creation process, when the design was impressed onto the die more than once and slightly misaligned. As a result, every coin struck from that die carried the same dramatic doubling. What makes this error so special is how clear and bold it is. Many doubled die coins show only slight doubling on letters or numbers that's hard to see without magnification. But on the 1984 doubled ear penny, the extra ear is visible to the naked eye once you know where to look. It's one of the easiest major errors for beginners to spot, which has made it famous among collectors and treasure hunters alike. Beyond the doubled ear, there are also other collectible varieties from 1984. Some coins show doubled lettering on Liberty or In God We Trust. Others may have off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or weak strikes due to worn dies. While these are less famous than the doubled ear, they can still bring premiums depending on their severity and condition. So why is the 1984 no mint mark penny considered rare or valuable? The answer is that most examples aren't rare at all. Billions were made, and millions still exist. But the double die variety is genuinely scarce compared to the total mintage. Only a small number of these error coins were released into circulation before the mistake was noticed. Many were spent, lost, or damaged before collectors began searching for them. Today, the 1984 doubled ear penny is one of the most widely collected modern error coins in the United States. It's often recommended as a starter error coin because it's dramatic, well documented, and still occasionally found in circulation or old coin jars. That combination of accessibility and rarity makes it especially exciting for both beginners and experienced collectors. Now let's talk about real-world values. In average circulated condition, a genuine 1984 doubled ear penny can sell for around $100 to $300, depending on how clear the doubling is and how worn the coin appears. In nicer uncirculated condition, prices often range from $400 to $1,000. And in top-grade examples certified by major grading services, prices can climb even higher. Some of the best-known auction results include coins selling for over $2,000, especially those graded mint state 65 or better with strong eye appeal. One particularly sharp example reportedly sold for several $1,000s at auction. Stunning collectors who never imagined a penny from the 1980s could reach that level. Even non-era 1984 pennies in pristine condition can sell for a few dollars to collectors building high-grade sets. The key point is this. While most 1984 pennies are worth 1 cent, a tiny percentage are worth hundreds or even thousands. And because they look almost identical at first glance, many people may still have one sitting unnoticed in a drawer or jar right now. So how do you identify a real 1984 doubled ear penny versus a fake or damaged coin? The first step is to look closely at Lincoln's ear on the front of the coin. On the doubled ear variety, you'll see a second, rounded ear shape just behind the main ear, almost like a clear echo of the original. This isn't a blur or smudge. It looks like a real, separate ear. Next, examine the doubling on the date and lettering. Many genuine examples also show slight doubling on Liberty, and In God We Trust, though the ear is the most important diagnostic feature. Use a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe if possible. But the ear doubling can often be seen without magnification once you know what to look for. Be cautious of coins that show flat, shelf-like doubling, especially on the date or letters. That type of doubling is usually caused by machine doubling, which happens during the striking process and does not add collector value. True doubled die coins show rounded, raised doubling that matches the original design. Also be aware that some damaged coins can appear doubled due to wear, scratches, or postmint alterations. A genuine doubled ear penny will have smooth surfaces and consistent design features, not rough gouges or unnatural shapes. If you think you've found one, it's a good idea to have it examined by a reputable coin dealer or submit it to a professional grading service for authentication. Now let's talk about some fun and surprising facts about the 1984 penny. One of the most interesting things is how long it took for the doubled ear error to become widely known. Even though these coins entered circulation in the mid-1980s, many collectors didn't realize how special they were until years later, when error coin specialists began publishing detailed studies and photos. By that time, countless examples had already been spent or lost. Another surprising detail is that this coin helped spark renewed interest in searching pocket change. During the 1990s and early 2000s, stories about the 1984 doubled ear penny circulated in hobby magazines and online forums, inspiring people to go through rolls of pennies from banks, old jars at home, and inherited coin collections. For many, it became their first experience with the thrill of the hunt. It's also worth noting that the 1984 doubled ear penny stands out because it's a major error on a modern coin. Many collectors assume that only old coins from the 1800s or early 1900s can be valuable. But this penny proves that even relatively recent coins can become important and desirable when something unusual happens during production. Another fun fact is that the Lincoln Memorial cent design itself ended in 2008. Starting in 2009, the Mint changed the reverse designs to celebrate Lincoln's life and later introduced the Union Shield reverse. That means the 1984 penny belongs to a design era that no longer exists, giving it a sense of nostalgia and historical closure. So why do collectors love this coin today? First, it combines accessibility with excitement. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars to own one, and there's always the chance you could find one yourself in circulation or an old collection. That possibility keeps people searching, learning, and engaging with the hobby. Second, it represents one of the clearest and most famous double die errors of the modern era. The doubled ear is dramatic, easy to recognize, and well documented, making it a perfect teaching coin for understanding how minting errors happen and why they matter. Third, the 1984 no mint mark penny tells a broader story about American coinage during a time of change. It reflects the shift to cheaper metals, the massive scale of modern minting operations, and the reality that even with advanced technology, mistakes can still slip through. Those mistakes, rare as they are, become windows into the hidden world behind everyday money. Finally, there's the emotional appeal. The idea that a single penny, something we usually ignore, could turn out to be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars captures the imagination. It transforms loose change into a treasure hunt and makes people look at their money in a whole new way. As we wrap up, here's the real takeaway. The 1984 no mint mark Lincoln penny is more than just another cent. Most of them are ordinary, but a few are extraordinary. Among billions of coins, a small group carries a dramatic error that turned them into modern legends of American coin collecting. And the best part is, some of them are still out there, waiting quietly in jars, drawers, and pockets to be discovered. So the next time you see a 1984 penny, don't rush to spend it. Take a second look at Lincoln's ear, because sometimes history hides in the smallest places, and the most ordinary-looking coin can carry the most surprising story. Most people walk past pennies on the ground without a second thought. But what if one of those tiny copper coins could quietly be worth far more than 1 cent, maybe even hundreds or thousands of dollars? Today, we're uncovering the true story behind one of the most misunderstood modern coins in America, the 1980 no mint Mark Lincoln penny. This coin looks ordinary at first glance. It's small, brown, and usually tucked away in jars, drawers, or old piggy banks. But the 1980 Lincoln cent holds an important place in US coin history, and in rare cases, certain examples have sold for surprising amounts of money. Whether you're a casual collector, someone who inherited old coins, or just curious about what might be hiding in your change, this story may change how you look at every penny from now on. The 1980 no mint Mark Lincoln penny was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. At that time, coins made in Philadelphia usually did not carry a mint mark, which is why this penny shows no letter beneath the date. That missing mint mark doesn't mean the coin is rare by itself, but it does place it at a specific mint with its own production story and quality patterns. And in the world of coin collecting, those small details matter more than most people realize. To understand why this penny is so interesting, we need to go back to the late 1970s and early 1980s. America was facing rising metal prices, especially copper. For decades, Lincoln pennies were made mostly of copper, and by the end of the 1970s, the metal inside a penny was starting to cost more than 1 cent itself. This created a major problem for the US Mint. It was literally becoming more expensive to make money than the money was worth. In 1980, the Mint was still producing copper-based pennies, but major changes were right around the corner. Just 2 years later, in 1982, the Lincoln cent would switch to a zinc core with a thin copper coating, ending the long tradition of solid copper cents. That makes the 1980 penny one of the final chapters in the classic copper Lincoln cent era, which began in 1909 with the original Lincoln design. During 1980, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 7.4 billion Lincoln cents. That's billion with a B. This massive number means most 1980 no mint mark pennies are common and worth only face value in circulated condition. But within that enormous production run, small groups of coins stood out. Some were struck better than others. Some escaped circulation in nearly perfect condition, and some were made with rare errors that transformed ordinary pennies into collector treasures. The 1980 Lincoln penny features the famous portrait of President Abraham Lincoln on the front, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. This design has appeared on the cent since 1909 and remains one of the most recognizable coin images in American history. Lincoln faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date to the right. On the back of the coin, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, introduced in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely, you can even spot a tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside the memorial between the columns. It's one of the smallest and most detailed design elements ever placed on a circulating US coin. In 1980, the penny was still made primarily of copper, about 95% copper with small amounts of zinc and tin. This gave the coin its warm reddish-brown color and slightly heavier feel compared to modern zinc cents. Many collectors appreciate these older copper cents because they represent a bygone era of US coinage, when even the smallest denomination contained real metal value. Now let's talk about what makes certain 1980 no mint mark pennies special. Most examples you'll find in circulation are worn, dull, and scratched, worth only 1 cent. But coins that were carefully preserved from the moment they were struck can look almost brand new decades later. These high-grade examples are called uncirculated coins, and they are far scarcer than most people expect, especially with strong detail and full mint luster. In professional grading, coins are rated on a scale from 1 to 70. A perfect coin scores 70, and most circulated pennies fall far below that. For the 1980 no mint mark penny, examples graded MS67 or higher are extremely rare, even though billions were made. That's because almost all of them were handled, rolled, counted, transporting, and spent, leaving tiny marks that reduce their grade. In recent years, some top-grade 1980 Philadelphia pennies have sold at auction for impressive amounts. For example, a 1980 Lincoln Cent graded MS67 red by a major grading service has sold for over $1,000. Even coins graded MS66 red can sell for $100 to $300 depending on eye appeal and market demand. These prices may sound shocking for a coin that once bought almost nothing, but condition is everything in modern coin collecting. Even more exciting are error coins. Errors occur when something goes wrong during the minting process, and they can dramatically increase a coin's value. Some 1980 no-mint mark pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design appears shifted toward one side of the coin. Others show doubled dies, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled due to a misaligned die during production. These errors can be subtle or dramatic, but when confirmed, they often sell for tens, hundreds, or even thousands of dollars. One of the most sought-after types is a double die obverse, where Lincoln's date or inscriptions appear doubled under magnification. Another valuable error is a broad strike, where the coin was struck without a retaining collar, causing it to spread out wider than normal. There are also wrong planchet errors, where a penny was struck on a blank intended for another coin. These are extremely rare and can command very high prices from collectors. So why does a coin that's technically common sometimes become valuable? The answer lies in scarcity of condition, not just scarcity of production. While billions were minted, very few survived in perfect or near-perfect condition, and even fewer contain dramatic errors. Collectors are willing to pay premium prices for coins that stand out from the ordinary, especially when they are certified by professional grading companies and preserved in protective holders. Now let's talk about how to identify a real 1980 no-mint mark Lincoln penny and avoid fakes or altered coins. First, check the date. It should clearly read 1980. Next, look under the date on the front of the coin. If there is no letter, that means it was made in Philadelphia. If you see a D or S, it was minted in Denver or San Francisco instead. Next, examine the weight. A genuine 1980 copper penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it weighs significantly less, it may be damaged, altered, or even plated. A digital scale can be very helpful here. Also look at the color and surface texture. Genuine copper pennies tend to have a warm reddish or brown tone, while plated or counterfeit coins may look unnaturally shiny or uneven. If you suspect you have a valuable error or high-grade coin, the best step is to have it authenticated and graded by a professional service. This not only confirms that the coin is real, but also protects it and makes it easier to sell if you ever choose to do so. Never clean a coin, even if it looks dirty. Cleaning can permanently damage the surface and destroy its collector value. Here's a fun fact that surprises many people. The 1980 Lincoln penny is part of the last full generation of traditional copper cents in everyday circulation. Just 2 years later, in 1982, the mint began producing zinc core pennies that feel lighter and sound different when dropped. That makes 1980 pennies some of the last widely used cents that still contain real copper value inside them. Another interesting detail is that although the Lincoln Memorial design seems simple, it actually contains one of the smallest human figures ever used on US coinage. The tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside the memorial can only be seen clearly with magnification. Many people carry these coins for years without ever noticing that detail. Collectors also love the 1980 penny because it sits at a turning point in US history. The country was entering a new decade. Inflation was high, and the mint was struggling with rising metal costs. This coin quietly represents the end of one era and the beginning of another. For collectors, coins like this aren't just metal. They're time capsules. Another surprising fact is that while billions were made, rolls of uncirculated 1980 pennies were rarely saved compared to earlier decades. In the 1950s and 1960s, people commonly saved rolls of new coins, thinking they might someday be valuable. By 1980, most people no longer did this, believing modern coins would never be worth more than face value. That's one reason high-grade examples are so scarce today. Collectors also appreciate the strong strike quality often seen on Philadelphia 1980 cents. Compared to some earlier years, many examples show sharp details in Lincoln's hair and coat, as well as clear steps on the Lincoln Memorial. When combined with bright original red color and minimal marks, these coins become highly desirable to advanced collectors building registry sets. Now, let's talk about real-world value examples. Most circulated 1980 no-mint mark pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. In slightly better condition, maybe 2 or 3 cents. But in uncirculated condition, values can range from a few dollars to over $100 depending on quality. Coins graded MS66 red often sell for around $50 to $150. Coins graded MS67 red can exceed $1,000. Error coins, depending on type and severity, can range from $20 to several $1,000s. One collector famously discovered a high-grade 1980 penny in an old bank roll purchased decades earlier. After professional grading, it sold at auction for over $1,200. Another example with a dramatic off-center strike brought several $100s, despite originally being found in loose pocket change. Stories like these fuel the excitement around modern coin searching, reminding people that hidden treasures can still be found in everyday places. So how do you spot a potentially valuable 1980 penny in your own collection? First, check the condition. Look for sharp details, strong shine, and minimal scratches. If the coin looks almost brand new, it might be worth closer inspection. Next, look for errors. Examine the date and lettering under magnification to see if anything looks doubled, crooked, or misaligned. Check the rim for unusual shapes or flattening. Even small oddities can point to something special. Then, check the color. Original uncirculated copper pennies often have a bright red or red-orange glow. Over time, copper naturally darkens to brown, but well-preserved coins can retain much of their original color. These are often labeled red by grading services and command higher prices than brown or red-brown examples. Collectors love the 1980 no-mint mark penny not because it's rare in quantity, but because it challenges assumptions. It reminds people that age alone doesn't determine value. Instead, it's about preservation, history, and uniqueness. It also offers a realistic entry point into coin collecting, where someone can still search through everyday change and occasionally find something exciting. For many collectors, the thrill isn't just in the money. It's in the hunt. It's in holding a small piece of history and wondering where it's been, whose hands it passed through, and how it survived decades of circulation. The 1980 Lincoln penny, humble as it seems, carries all of that mystery in a coin most people barely notice. And there's something poetic about that. A coin worth 1 cent, created during a time of economic uncertainty, still quietly circulating through the country decades later, sometimes overlooked, sometimes saved, and occasionally rediscovered as something far more meaningful than its face value suggests. So the next time you find a 1980 penny without a mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Check the date, the color, the condition, and the details. You might be holding a simple cent, or you might be holding a coin that collectors would gladly pay serious money for. Either way, you're holding a small piece of American history. In a world that moves faster every year, coins like the 1980 Lincoln penny remind us that even the smallest objects can carry big stories. They connect us to the past, to moments of change, and to the idea that value isn't always obvious at first glance. And who knows, the next time you empty your pockets or open a jar of loose change, one of those quiet copper coins might just surprise you. Sometimes the most ordinary things hide the most extraordinary stories, and sometimes the next great discovery really is just a penny away. Most people walk right past this penny without giving it a second look. But some 1979 D Lincoln cents have sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars, and the reason why is hidden in details almost nobody checks. Today, we're diving into the 1979 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary at first glance, but carries a fascinating story of American history, unexpected errors, and quiet collector demand that continues more than 4 decades later. This coin was struck in 1979 at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries the small letter D just below the date on the front. It's part of the Lincoln Memorial Penny series, a design Americans saw in their pockets for nearly 50 years. Millions were made, and most are still worth just 1 cent, but not all of them. Some rare versions and minting mistakes from this year have become surprisingly valuable, turning everyday change into serious collector pieces. To understand why this penny exists at all, we need to step back into the late 1970s. America was dealing with inflation, rising metal costs, and economic uncertainty. The price of copper had climbed so high that it was starting to cost more than 1 cent to produce a single penny. Yet the US Mint still needed to keep small coins flowing into circulation for daily transactions. So in 1979, the Mint continued striking Lincoln cents, using the same bronze-based composition it had used since 1962, while quietly preparing for major changes that would arrive just a few years later. The Lincoln cent itself has one of the longest-running designs in American history. Abraham Lincoln first appeared on the penny in 1909, marking the 100th anniversary of his birth. By 1959, the wheat stalks on the back were replaced with the Lincoln Memorial, a powerful symbol of American unity and history. That same design was still in use in 1979, meaning the 1979 D penny carries a visual style already familiar to generations of Americans. At the Denver Mint alone, more than 4 billion pennies were struck in 1979. That massive number explains why most examples are extremely common today. You'll still find them in old jars, dresser drawers, and forgotten coin rolls. But within those billions of coins are rare mistakes, special conditions, and high-quality survivors that collectors actively seek out. Let's talk about what makes the 1979 D penny special. First, the metal. This coin is made of 95% copper with 5% zinc, weighing about 3.11 grams. That copper-rich composition gives the coin its warm reddish-brown color when new. Over time, most examples toned darker, but well-preserved red specimens, especially ones that never circulated, are far scarcer than people realize. The front shows Abraham Lincoln's profile, designed by Victor David Brenner. You'll see the words "In God We Trust" above Lincoln's head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1979 with a small D mint mark just below it. On the back is the Lincoln Memorial, with a tiny statue of Lincoln visible between the central columns, one of the most detailed reverse designs ever used on a US coin. At first glance, nothing seems unusual, but collectors know that coins aren't just about design. They're about condition, strike quality, and especially errors. Some of the most valuable 1979 D pennies are error coins. These are coins that were accidentally struck incorrectly during the minting process. One of the most famous errors for this year is the off-center strike. These happen when the blank coin isn't properly aligned during striking, causing part of the design to miss the coin entirely. A dramatic off-center 1979 D penny, especially one showing the date clearly, can sell for anywhere from $50 to several $100s, depending on how extreme and attractive the error is. Another sought-after error is the double die. This occurs when the coin's design is imprinted twice slightly out of alignment, causing a doubling effect on letters or numbers. On some 1979 D pennies, collectors have found noticeable doubling on the date, the word Liberty, or Lincoln's profile. Genuine double die examples can sell for hundreds of dollars, and in high-grade condition, sometimes even more. There are also clipped planchets, where a piece of the coin blank is missing before striking, leaving a curved or straight-edge gap in the finished coin. These errors are popular because they're easy to see and clearly different from normal coins. A clipped 1979 D penny can sell for $30 to $150 or more depending on size and condition. Then there are wrong planchet errors, coins struck on metal intended for other denominations or years. These are extremely rare, but when they appear, they can command thousands of dollars. A 1979 D penny struck on the wrong metal would immediately stand out by weight and color, making it one of the most exciting discoveries a collector could make. But even without errors, condition alone can make a massive difference in value. Most 1979 D pennies are worn, darkened, or scratched from years of circulation. These are typically worth just 1 cent, but coins that were pulled from circulation early or stored carefully in rolls can still appear bright red, with sharp details and no wear. These are known as mint state coins, and collectors pay premiums for them, especially the highest grade examples. Professional grading services assign coins grades from MS60 to MS70, with MS70 being a perfect coin. For modern pennies, anything graded MS67 or higher becomes dramatically scarcer. A 1979 D penny graded MS67 red can sell for $150 to $300 or more. Coins graded MS68 red are extremely rare and have sold at auction for well over $1,000. These prices might surprise people who think modern pennies can't be valuable, but scarcity in top condition is just as important as age, sometimes even more so. One notable auction sale involved a 1979 D penny graded MS68 red that sold for over $1,400. Another near-perfect example brought more than $1,200 at a major coin auction. Error coins from this year have also crossed the $500 to $2,000 range, depending on type and visual impact. While these are not everyday prices, they show that this humble penny still has serious collector potential. So how do you tell if your 1979 D penny is special or just spare change? Start with the basics. Look under the date for the small D mint mark. If there's no mint mark, the coin was struck in Philadelphia. If there's an S, it came from San Francisco, usually as a proof. For this video, we're focused on the Denver version. Next, check the condition. If the coin is dark brown, heavily scratched, or worn flat, it's likely only worth face value. But if it's bright red or reddish-orange with full details and no wear on Lincoln's cheek or jawline, it might be worth closer inspection. Then, look closely at the date and lettering using a magnifying glass. Check for doubling, unusual thickness, or shadow-like outlines on letters and numbers. True doubling will look raised and rounded, not flat or blurry. Check the edge of the coin. It should be smooth and uniform. If you see a curved missing section, that could be a clipped planchet. Also weigh the coin if you can. A standard 1979 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it's significantly lighter or heavier, it could indicate a wrong planchet or metal error. Avoid cleaning the coin. Even gentle cleaning can damage the surface and dramatically reduce collector value. Collectors prefer original, untouched coins, even if they're toned or darkened naturally. One important warning: fake errors do exist. Some people alter coins by filing, grinding, or striking them themselves to create fake errors. These usually leave tool marks, unnatural edges, or flattened metal. Genuine mint errors have smooth, natural-looking metal flow and consistent wear patterns. If you think you've found something valuable, professional authentication is always the safest route. Now let's talk about some fun and surprising facts about the 1979 D penny. First, it was one of the last full years of copper-rich pennies before the US. Mint changed the composition in 1982 to copper-plated zinc. That makes 1979 pennies heavier and more copper-rich than most modern cents, and some people even collect them for their metal content alone, though melting them is illegal. Second, the Lincoln memorial design used on this coin would disappear just 30 years later in 2009, replaced by new designs celebrating Lincoln's life and legacy. That means the 1979 penny belongs to the final decades of a classic design that many collectors now consider nostalgic. Third, despite billions being made, fewer than a tiny fraction survive today in truly high-grade condition. Most were spent, dropped, scratched, or corroded. So when collectors pay four figures for a top-quality example, they're not paying for age, they're paying for rarity in preservation. Fourth, the Denver Mint in 1979 was one of the busiest mints in American history, producing massive quantities of coins to meet demand. High-speed production increased the chance of minting errors, which is one reason error collectors pay close attention to this year. And finally, many collectors today specifically search bank rolls and old coin jars for 1979 pennies, hoping to find overlooked gems. It's one of the years that proves treasure hunting doesn't require ancient coins. Sometimes it's hiding in ordinary change. So why do collectors love the 1979 D. Lincoln penny today? Part of the appeal is accessibility. Almost anyone can afford one. You can still find them in circulation or buy rolls cheaply, making them perfect for beginners. At the same time, the possibility of rare errors or high-grade survivors gives even experienced collectors a reason to search. Another reason is history. This coin represents a moment just before major changes in US coinage. It's part of the final chapter of the classic copper penny era and one of the last generations to carry the Lincoln Memorial design. That combination of familiarity and transition gives it lasting appeal. Collectors also love the challenge. Finding a truly high-grade example or genuine error from this year takes patience, skill, and a sharp eye. When someone finally discovers one, it feels like uncovering a hidden story that's been sitting quietly for decades. And for many people, there's something deeply satisfying about realizing that a coin you once ignored could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, simply because you learned what to look for. So if you have a 1979 D penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a moment to examine it under good light. Check the color, the details, the weight, and the lettering. Look for doubling, missing metal, or anything that seems slightly off. Most will be ordinary, but every once in a while, one won't be. And that's what makes coin collecting so powerful. It turns everyday objects into potential discoveries. It transforms spare change into history, mystery, and sometimes even unexpected value. The next time you empty your pockets or open an old coin jar, remember this. Somewhere among those pennies could be a 1979 D cent with a story no one has noticed yet. A tiny copper disc that's already traveled through decades of American life and might just be waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. Because sometimes the most ordinary-looking coins hold the most surprising secrets, and the next one could be in your hands right now. Imagine finding a penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, but could quietly be worth far more than 1 cent. Not because it's ancient, not because it's gold, but because of tiny details most people never notice. Today, we're uncovering the surprising story behind the 1978 no mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin millions of Americans have held in their hands without realizing what makes certain examples truly special. The 1978 no mint mark Lincoln penny is one of the most common coins in American circulation, yet it also belongs to one of the most important chapters in US coin history. No mint mark means the coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not use mint marks on pennies until much later. So if you see a 1978 penny without a letter under the date, that's exactly what you're holding. At first glance, it's just another copper-colored cent, but its story connects to economic change, metal shortages, and the final years of the classic solid copper penny. To understand why this coin matters, we have to step back to the late 1970s. America was going through economic challenges, rising inflation, and growing concerns about the cost of metal used in coins. The US Mint was already studying ways to reduce production costs, especially for the penny, which by then was costing close to its face value to produce. But in 1978, pennies were still being made the old-fashioned way, using mostly copper, just as they had been since the early 1900s. That makes 1978 part of the final chapter of the classic copper penny era. Just 4 years later, in 1982, the mint would switch to zinc cores with thin copper plating. So the 1978 penny represents one of the last full years of the heavier, solid-feeling cents many collectors love. Over 5.5 billion pennies were struck in Philadelphia that year, which sounds massive, and it is. But inside those billions are small varieties and rare errors that can turn an ordinary coin into something truly valuable. Design-wise, the 1978 penny features the familiar Lincoln portrait on the front, designed by Victor David Brenner. Abraham Lincoln faces right, with the word liberty behind his head, the date in front of his face, and the motto "In God We Trust" along the top edge. This design had been used since 1909, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. On the back, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, introduced in 1959 to mark Lincoln's 150th birthday. Inside the memorial, if you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln sitting in the center, making this one of the few U.S. coins to feature the same person on both sides. By 1978, Americans were deeply familiar with this design, but that familiarity hides some fascinating details. The metal composition of the 1978 penny is 95% copper and 5% zinc. It weighs about 3.11 grams and has a solid, heavier feel compared to modern pennies. Many collectors prefer these older copper cents because of their color, durability, and historical character. Over time, some develop deep brown tones, while others retain bright red surfaces if well preserved. Now let's talk about what makes some 1978 no-mint mark pennies special. The most valuable examples are not ordinary circulation coins. They are high-grade uncirculated coins, especially those with original red luster that look almost exactly as they did the day they left the mint. Coins like this are graded by professional services and labeled with grades like MS65, MS66, or even higher. The higher the number, the better the condition, and the more valuable the coin becomes. But condition alone isn't the only factor. Errors and varieties play a major role in the value of certain 1978 pennies. One of the most famous is the doubled die error. This happens when the coin die receives a misaligned impression during production, causing letters or numbers to appear doubled on the finished coin. On some 1978 pennies, this doubling can be seen in the date, the word liberty, or the motto, "In God We Trust." These aren't blurry or damaged coins. They show clear, separated doubling that looks like a shadow or echo of the original letters. Another type of valuable error is the off-center strike, where the design is shifted away from the center of the coin, leaving part of the blank metal exposed. Some off-center coins are subtle, while others are dramatic enough that parts of the design are missing entirely. These errors are highly collectible because each one is unique. There are also clipped planchets, where part of the metal blank was cut incorrectly before striking, leaving a curved or straight missing section on the edge. And then there are broad strikes, where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar, causing it to spread wider than normal. All of these mistakes tell a story about what went wrong during the minting process, and collectors love them because they turn everyday coins into one-of-a-kind pieces. So how valuable can a 1978 no-mint mark penny really be? In everyday circulated condition, it's usually worth just 1 or 2 cents. That's the reality for most examples. But in high-grade uncirculated condition, the value rises quickly. Professional grading services have sold 1978 Philadelphia pennies in MS66 red condition for anywhere from $15 to $40, depending on eye appeal and demand. In MS67 red, which is extremely difficult to find because even tiny marks can lower the grade, prices can climb into the $100 to $200 range, and sometimes higher during competitive auctions. These are coins that look almost flawless under magnification, with blazing red surfaces and sharp details. Error coins can bring even stronger prices. A genuine 1978 double die penny with clear, bold doubling can sell for $100 to several $100s, depending on the strength and location of the doubling. Dramatic off-center strikes or major mint errors have sold for anywhere from $50 to $300 or more, especially when the date and design remain visible and the coin is visually striking. These values might not sound like millions, but remember, this is a coin most people spend without a second thought. Turning a penny into $100, or more simply, by knowing what to look for, is exactly why collectors stay fascinated by modern coins like this one. Now, let's talk about how to identify a real 1978 no-mint mark penny and avoid fakes or altered coins. First, check the date and the area below it. If there's no letter like D or S, that's correct for a Philadelphia coin. Next, weigh the coin. A genuine copper penny from 1978 should weigh around 3.11 grams. If it's significantly lighter, it may be plated, damaged, or altered. Look closely at the details using a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. On genuine doubled die coins, the doubling will look strong and clean, especially on the edges of letters and numbers. It won't look like smearing or mechanical doubling, which is flatter and less distinct. If you see doubling that looks like flat shadows or shelf-like edges, that's usually not a true doubled die and carries little to no premium. Check the edges for signs of tampering. Some altered coins are made by adding or removing mint marks or modifying dates. On a genuine 1978 no mint mark penny, the area below the date should look smooth and natural, with no tool marks or odd textures. When in doubt, professional grading services are the safest option. They authenticate, grade, and encapsulate coins, giving collectors confidence in what they're buying or selling. While grading isn't necessary for every coin, it can make a big difference for higher value examples. Here's something many people don't realize about the 1978 penny. Even though billions were made, truly perfect examples are surprisingly rare. That's because pennies circulate heavily, get scratched easily, and often develop spots, stains, or dull surfaces. Finding one with full red color, clean fields, and sharp details after decades of circulation is incredibly difficult. That's why top-grade examples command such strong prices. Another fun fact is that the copper content in Preminis 1,982 pennies sometimes attracts people interested in metal value rather than numismatics. While melting pennies is illegal, some collectors enjoy stacking copper cents simply because of their weight, feel, and connection to older American coinage traditions. The 1978 penny fits squarely into that category, representing the final years of a classic material that defined US cents for generations. There's also something fascinating about how this coin connects everyday Americans to history. In 1978, people used these pennies to buy newspapers, candy, stamps, and everyday goods. They passed through countless hands during a time of cultural change, economic uncertainty, and technological growth. Each coin quietly witnessed decades of life, even though no one paid much attention to it. Collectors love the 1978 no mint mark penny, not because it's rare in general, but because it represents opportunity. It's a reminder that valuable coins don't always come from ancient times or famous years. Sometimes they come from ordinary pockets and change jars. The thrill lies in knowing that one coin out of thousands might be something special. Another reason collectors appreciate this coin is its role as a teaching piece. It helps beginners learn about mint marks, grading, errors, and copper composition. It's affordable, accessible, and widely available, making it a perfect entry point into the hobby. Yet at the same time, it offers real potential for discovery, especially when searching through rolls or inherited collections. There's also a deeper emotional connection many collectors feel toward copper pennies from this era. The weight, color, and sound of these coins bring back memories of childhood, piggy banks, and coin jars on kitchen counters. The 1978 penny sits right at the end of that tradition, just before the lighter zinc cents took over. For many people, it represents the last of the old pennies, even though the official change came a few years later. Let's talk about one more surprising detail. Even among collectors, many people overlook 1978 because it doesn't stand out as a famous year. But that's exactly why hidden gems still exist. High-grade examples and rare errors remain tucked away in collections, bank rolls, and old jars, waiting for someone to take a closer look. Unlike classic rarities that have already been discovered and documented, modern-era coins like this still offer the excitement of real-world treasure hunting. And that brings us to the heart of why this coin matters. The 1978 no mint mark Lincoln penny reminds us that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight, waiting for curiosity to uncover it. It teaches patience, observation, and attention to detail. It turns everyday objects into historical artifacts. And for some lucky collectors, it turns spare change into something far more meaningful. So the next time you come across a penny dated 1978, don't dismiss it too quickly. Hold it in your hand. Look at the date. Check for a mint mark. Examine the letters. Notice the color and condition. Because even though most of them are worth just 1 cent, a small number tell a very different story. A story of minting errors, pristine preservation, and hidden value. A story that proves even the smallest coin can carry a surprisingly big legacy. And who knows? The next time you dig through a jar of change or open a roll of pennies from the bank, the coin that changes how you see everyday money might already be waiting for you. Imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out a penny, only to discover it could be worth far more than 1 cent. Not because it's gold or silver, but because of a tiny detail almost everyone ignores. Today, we're uncovering the story of the 1976 no mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary at first glance, yet holds a surprising place in American coin history. This coin is a 1 cent piece featuring Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. It was made in 1976 and has no mint mark under the date, which means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Millions of these pennies were produced, and most people have handled one at some point in their lives. But as with many coins, a small number stand out in ways that collectors find fascinating and sometimes valuable. To understand this penny, we need to go back to the year 1976. America was celebrating its bicentennial, marking 200 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The nation was in a mood of reflection, pride, and celebration. While special designs appeared on quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins, the penny stayed mostly the same. Even so, the Lincoln cent of 1976 was part of that historic year's coinage, quietly circulating while the country celebrated its past and looked toward its future. The Lincoln cent itself has a long history. Abraham Lincoln first appeared on the penny in 1909, marking the 100th anniversary of his birth. It was the first US coin to feature a real person rather than a symbolic figure. By 1959, the reverse design changed to show the Lincoln Memorial, replacing the wheat ears that had been on earlier pennies. This memorial design was still in use in 1976, making that year's penny instantly recognizable to anyone who has ever handled spare change. Now let's talk about what makes the 1976 no mint mark penny unique. First, the metal. By the mid-1970s, pennies were no longer made of mostly copper. Rising copper prices made it too expensive to keep using the old metal mix. So, in 1976, pennies were struck from a core of zinc coated with a thin layer of copper. This gives the coin its familiar reddish-brown color, but inside, it's mostly zinc. This change is important because it affects how the coin ages and how collectors evaluate its condition today. The design itself features Abraham Lincoln's profile on the front, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date to the right. On coins struck in Philadelphia, there is no mint mark beneath the date. On the back, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, with a tiny statue of Lincoln visible between the columns if you look closely. Above the building are the words United States of America, and below it, 1 cent. Across the top of the memorial is the motto E pluribus unum. At first glance, the 1976 no mint mark penny seems ordinary, and in most cases it is. Millions were minted, and the vast majority are worth only face value. But collectors know that within large mintages, small variations, errors, and high-grade examples can turn common coins into something special. One of the most interesting aspects of the 1976 penny is the possibility of mint errors. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the minting process, such as a misaligned strike, a doubled image, or an incomplete design. Some 1976 pennies show doubled lettering, where parts of the date or words appear slightly shadowed or doubled. Others may have off-center strikes, clipped edges, or unusual surface marks caused by defects in the metal blanks. Another factor that can increase value is condition. Coins are graded on a scale that ranges from heavily worn to perfect mint state. Most 1976 pennies found in circulation today show signs of wear. Flattened details, darkened surfaces, and small scratches. But a penny that was saved when new and kept in pristine condition, especially one with strong original luster and no marks, can be surprisingly valuable to collectors. So why would anyone pay more than a cent for a 1976 no mint mark penny? The answer lies in rarity within quality. While the coin itself is common, high-grade examples are not. Pennies made for circulation were not handled gently. They were dumped into bags, shipped across the country, and passed from hand to hand. Finding one that looks nearly perfect decades later is much harder than it sounds. In addition, error coins are naturally rare because they were never meant to exist. When one slips past quality control, it becomes a unique piece of history, showing us what went wrong behind the scenes at the mint. Collectors love these coins because they tell a story of human imperfection in a process designed for precision. Now let's talk about real-world value examples. Most worn 1976 no mint mark pennies are worth just 1 cent. Even in uncirculated condition, many sell for only a few cents to a dollar. However, coins graded in top condition by professional grading services can sell for significantly more. Some high-grade examples, especially those with strong color and flawless surfaces, have sold for tens or even hundreds of dollars. Error coins are where prices can climb even higher. A 1976 penny with a noticeable double die error, especially if the doubling is strong and clear on the date or lettering, can sell for anywhere from $20 to over $100, depending on its condition and the strength of the error. Off-center strikes and other dramatic errors can sometimes bring similar or higher prices, especially if the date and design remain visible. While these amounts won't usually reach the thousands, they still represent a remarkable return for a coin that once bought almost nothing. And for collectors, the thrill isn't just in the money. It's in discovering something unusual in an ordinary place, like a jar of spare change or a drawer that hasn't been opened in years. If you think you might have a valuable 1976 no mint mark penny, the first step is learning how to identify it correctly. Start by checking the date. It should read 1976, and there should be no letter beneath the date. That means it was struck in Philadelphia. Next, examine the condition. Look at Lincoln's hair and cheek, the lettering on both sides, and the details of the memorial. Sharper details usually mean higher value. Then look for errors. Use a magnifying glass or a smartphone camera to zoom in on the date and words. Check for doubling, where letters or numbers appear thick, shadowed, or split. Look for off-center designs, missing parts of the rim, or strange shapes along the edge of the coin. Also examine the surface for unusual textures or patterns that don't match normal wear. To avoid fakes, it helps to know that most counterfeit pennies are rare, but altered coins do exist. Some people try to add errors artificially by damaging coins or altering dates. A real mint error usually looks natural, not scratched, gouged, or forced. If you suspect you have something valuable, consider having it evaluated by a reputable coin dealer or a professional grading service. Weighing the coin can also help. A genuine 1976 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it weighs significantly more or less, it could indicate damage, corrosion, or an unusual error. Checking the diameter and thickness can also confirm authenticity, though most modern counterfeits fail in obvious ways. Now let's explore a few fun facts about the 1976 penny and its place in American culture. First, even though 1976 was a major anniversary year for the United States, the penny did not receive a special bicentennial design. That makes it unique compared to the quarter, half dollar, and dollar coins of that year, which featured patriotic themes and dates like 1776, 1976. the penny stayed consistent, quietly continuing the Lincoln Memorial design that Americans had grown used to. Another interesting detail is that many people alive today have handled thousands of these coins without ever realizing that some could be worth more than face value. The penny is so common and so small in value that it's often overlooked, tossed into jars, forgotten in drawers, or left behind on counters. Yet within those piles of copper-colored coins, small treasures sometimes hide in plain sight. It's also worth noting that pennies from this era tend to develop a different kind of wear than older copper pennies. Because they are copper-plated zinc, damage to the thin copper layer can expose the silvery gray zinc underneath. This makes them more vulnerable to corrosion and bubbling, which can lower their value, but also makes well-preserved examples even more desirable. Collectors today love the 1976 no mint mark penny, not because it's rare in general, but because it represents the idea that everyday objects can become collectibles. It's a reminder that history isn't only found in museums or vaults. Sometimes it's sitting in your pocket, disguised as something ordinary. For many collectors, this coin is also part of a larger story, the Lincoln Cent series itself. Some people try to collect one penny from every year and mint, creating a timeline of American history told through small pieces of metal. In that context, the 1976 penny represents the bicentennial era, a time of national reflection and celebration, even if the coin itself didn't carry a special design. There's also a powerful emotional connection to pennies. They remind people of childhood coin jars, piggy banks, lemonade stands, and the simple joy of counting small change. Finding a potentially valuable penny among those memories adds a layer of excitement and nostalgia that few other collectibles can match. Another surprising detail is how modern technology has changed coin collecting. Today, collectors can use digital scales, microscopes, and online databases to analyze coins in ways that weren't possible decades ago. This means that even subtle variations or errors on a 1976 penny can be documented, shared, and valued by collectors around the world. What once might have gone unnoticed can now become a recognized and desirable piece. Yet, despite all this technology, the heart of coin collecting remains simple: curiosity, the desire to look closer, to ask questions, and to understand the story behind something small and ordinary. The 1976 no mint mark penny captures that spirit perfectly. It invites you to slow down, examine details, and consider that even the most common objects can have uncommon stories. So, the next time you see a penny dated 1976, don't dismiss it right away. Take a closer look. Check for the absence of a mint mark. Examine the condition. Search for errors. You might just discover a coin that's more interesting and possibly more valuable than you ever expected. Even if your coin turns out to be worth only a cent, you've still gained something valuable. A connection to history, a moment of curiosity, and a reminder that small things can hold big stories. And sometimes that's the real reward of collecting. Because somewhere out there, in a forgotten jar, a dusty drawer, or the bottom of a purse, there may be a 1976 no mint mark Lincoln penny waiting to be noticed. And the next pair of eyes that looks closely at it might be yours. Imagine finding a single penny in your pocket that looks ordinary, but could secretly be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Not because it's gold, not because it's ancient, but because of one tiny letter beneath the date. Today, we're uncovering the true story behind the 1969 D. Lincoln penny, a coin most people ignore, but collectors quietly hunt. This coin is the 1969 Lincoln 1-cent piece with a D mint mark, meaning it was made at the Denver Mint. At first glance, it looks like any other penny from the late 1960s. Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back. Copper color, simple, common, forgettable. But beneath that ordinary look is a coin with a fascinating history, surprising variations, and hidden value potential that most people never notice. To understand why this penny matters, we have to travel back to 1969, a year filled with historic change in America. It was the year humans first walked on the moon. The Vietnam War dominated headlines. Protests filled the streets. Technology was racing forward, and American culture was shifting fast. And while all of this was happening, the US Mint was working overtime producing billions of coins to keep the economy moving. The Lincoln penny had already been in circulation for 60 years by then. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, making it the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. By 1959, the reverse design was changed from wheat stalks to the Lincoln Memorial, and that same memorial design was still being used in 1969. So the 1969 D penny belongs to what collectors call the memorial cent era, a long-running and familiar design that many Americans grew up with. In 1969 alone, the Denver Mint struck over 4.1 billion pennies. That's billion. With a B, it sounds impossible that any coin from such massive production could be valuable, and most of them aren't. But here's where the story gets interesting. Even when billions of coins are made, tiny mistakes can happen. And sometimes, those mistakes turn an everyday coin into a collector's treasure. The 1969 D penny is made mostly of copper, about 95% copper with small amounts of zinc and tin. It weighs about 3.11 grams and has a smooth edge. On the front, Lincoln faces right, with the word Liberty to the left and the date and mint mark to the right. The letter D beneath the year tells us it was made in Denver. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands tall, with 1 cent and United States of America across the top and bottom, and EPLURIBUS UNUM above the building. Design-wise, nothing seems unusual, but collectors know that value often hides in small details. For example, strike quality matters. Some 1969 D pennies were struck sharply, with strong detail in Lincoln's hair, coat, and the columns of the memorial. Others came out weak or blurry, especially on the reverse, where the memorial lines can look soft or faded. Coins with especially crisp details are more desirable, especially if they were saved in high condition. But the real excitement comes from errors and rare varieties. While the famous double die penny from 1969 came from the San Francisco Mint, not Denver, the Denver Mint still produced coins with smaller but fascinating mistakes. These include off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, die chips, and coins struck on defective metal blanks. Each of these errors tells a story about what went wrong inside the minting process, and collectors love that. For example, an off-center strike happens when the blank coin isn't properly aligned during striking, causing part of the design to be missing. Some 1969 D pennies exist with dramatic off-center errors, showing only half of Lincoln's face or missing parts of the memorial. These coins can sell for tens or even hundreds of dollars, depending on how dramatic the error is and whether the date and mint mark are still visible. Another exciting error is the clipped planchet. This happens when the metal blank is improperly cut, leaving a curved or straight chunk missing from the coin's edge. A 1969 D penny with a visible clip, especially if it's large and clean, can also bring strong collector interest and prices. Then there are die cracks and die breaks. These happen when the metal dies used to strike coins develop cracks or fractures, leaving raised lines or blobs on the finished coin. Some collectors specialize in these, and larger, more dramatic examples can command premiums over face value. But beyond errors, the most valuable versions of the 1969 D penny are simply those in outstanding condition. This is where things get surprising. Even though billions were made, almost all of them circulated. They went through pockets, purses, cash registers, vending machines, and parking meters. They picked up scratches, stains, and wear. Very few were saved in pristine condition straight from the bank. Coins are graded on a scale that measures wear and quality. The highest grades, often called mint state, mean the coin shows no signs of circulation. Within that category, coins graded M-67 or higher are extremely rare for this date and mint. These are coins with blazing luster, razor-sharp detail, and virtually no visible marks. In collector markets, a typical circulated 1969 D penny is worth exactly 1 cent. A nice uncirculated example might be worth anywhere from 10 cents to $1, but a top-grade specimen, one of the very best known, can sell for hundreds of dollars. In recent years, professionally graded 1969D pennies in extremely high grades have sold at auction for several $100s, with some examples approaching the $1,000 mark when competition is strong and eye appeal is exceptional. That's not because the coin is rare in general, it's because finding one in nearly perfect condition is incredibly rare. Error coins bring even more excitement. Some off-center strikes from 1969D have sold in the $50 to $300 range, depending on severity. Dramatic clipped planchets have reached similar prices, and unusual die breaks or multi-struck examples can go even higher if they're visually striking. So how can you tell if your 1969D penny might be special? First, look at the mint mark. It should be a small D just below the date on the front of the coin. If there's no letter, it was made in Philadelphia. If there's an S, it was made in San Francisco. We're focusing on Denver. Next, examine the condition. Is the coin shiny with no wear on Lincoln's cheek, jaw, or coat? Do the letters look sharp? Are the memorial lines on the back crisp? The better the condition, the better the potential. Then look for errors. Is the design off-center? Is part of the coin missing? Do you see strange raised lines or blobs that don't belong? Does the date look doubled or distorted? Any of these could indicate a mint error worth further research. One important thing to know is that the famous 1969 double die penny that sells for tens of thousands of dollars does not have a D mint mark. It was made in San Francisco and has no mint mark at all. Some people confuse normal 1969D pennies with that legendary coin, so it's important to know the difference. If your coin has a D under the date, it is not that ultra-rare double die variety, but that doesn't mean it can't still be valuable in other ways. To avoid fakes or altered coins, always inspect the mint mark closely. On genuine coins, the mint mark is part of the original strike and blends naturally into the surface. On altered coins, it may look scratched in, glued on, or slightly different in color or texture. Also be cautious of coins that appear artificially worn or cleaned. Cleaning a coin can dramatically reduce its value, even if it looks shinier afterward. If you think you've found something special, the safest move is to have the coin examined by a reputable coin dealer or submitted to a professional grading service. That's the only way to know its true condition and market value with confidence. Now let's talk about some fun and surprising facts about the 1969D penny. First, this coin was struck during the last full year of the 95% copper composition. Just a few years later, rising copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to change the penny's metal content to mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. That makes coins like the 1969D penny part of the final generation of traditional solid copper cents, which adds to their historical appeal. Second, even though billions were made, most Americans never think twice about pennies from the 1960s. They blend in with modern change. That means valuable examples still turn up in circulation, old jars, inherited collections, and forgotten boxes in drawers and closets. People sometimes discover them by accident, while rolling coins, cleaning out a desk, or checking spare change for fun. Third, the Lincoln Memorial reverse design on this coin actually shows a tiny image of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial. If you look closely between the central columns, you can see his statue. That makes it one of the few US coins to feature the same person on both sides of the coin at the same time. Collectors love the 1969D penny not because it's flashy, but because it represents something deeper. It's a snapshot of everyday America during one of the most dramatic years in modern history. It's a coin millions of people handled without thinking. Yet some examples now sit in climate-controlled holders, traded at auctions, and studied under magnification. It also appeals to collectors who enjoy the challenge of condition rarity. Anyone can find a worn 1969D penny, but finding one in near-perfect condition, with blazing luster and flawless surfaces, is like finding a needle in a haystack. That hunt, that chase, is what keeps collectors searching through rolls, jars, and boxes year after year. And for error collectors, this coin offers endless fascination. Every mint error tells a story about what went wrong in the production process: a misaligned strike, a cracked die, a defective blank. Each one is unique, and once it's out in the world, it can never be repeated in exactly the same way. What makes this even more exciting is that most people still don't look closely at their pennies. They spend them, they toss them in jars, they leave them in cars and couches, which means valuable coins can sit unnoticed for decades, waiting for someone curious enough to take a closer look. So the next time you come across a handful of old pennies, don't rush past them. Flip them over. Check the dates. Look for that small D beneath 1969. Tilt the coin in the light. Look for shine, sharp detail, or strange markings. That 1 cent piece might be more than spare change. It might be a piece of American history. It might be a rare error. It might even be worth far more than you ever expected. The 1969 D Lincoln penny reminds us of something powerful. Sometimes the most ordinary objects carry extraordinary stories. They pass through countless hands unnoticed, quietly waiting for someone to recognize their hidden value. And who knows, the next remarkable coin discovery might not come from a vault or a museum. It might come from your pocket, your drawer, or the bottom of a forgotten jar. So keep looking, keep checking, because even the smallest coin can hold a big surprise. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second glance, but a small number of 1967 Lincoln cents are hiding stories that have surprised collectors, shocked beginners, and in rare cases, sold for prices that don't feel real for a coin worth just 1 cent on its face. Today, we're exploring the 1967 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin millions of Americans have held, spent, and forgotten, yet one that quietly sits at the center of one of the most unusual moments in U.S. coin history. At first glance, this coin looks simple. Abraham Lincoln's portrait faces right on the front, just like many other pennies. On the back, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, a design used for decades. There's nothing flashy, nothing rare-looking, nothing that screams valuable. And yet, the year 1967 places this penny in a strange and fascinating chapter of American money, a time when the US government made a decision that forever changed how coins were produced and collected. Let's start with what this coin actually is. The 1967 Lincoln penny is a 1 cent coin struck by the United States Mint during a year when mint marks were intentionally removed from all US coins. That means no matter where this penny was made, it carries no letter under the date. No D, no S, nothing at all. Just the year 1967 and Lincoln's familiar face. More than 2 billion of these pennies were struck, making it one of the highest mintage years in Lincoln cent history. So how could something so common possibly be interesting? The answer lies not in how many were made, but in why they were made the way they were and what collectors later discovered hiding among them. To understand this coin, we need to go back to the 1960s. In the early part of the decade, the United States faced a nationwide coin shortage. People were hoarding coins, not because they were valuable, but because silver prices were rising. Dimes, quarters, and half dollars still contained real silver, and Americans began pulling them from circulation, afraid they'd soon be worth more melted down than spent. Even pennies and nickels started disappearing as panic spread. The US Mint needed a solution, and fast. So in 1965, the government did something unprecedented. They removed silver from circulating coins, and to discourage collectors from hoarding new issues, they also removed mint marks entirely. From 1965 through 1967, every coin, no matter where it was struck, carried no mint mark at all. The goal was simple: make coins feel ordinary again, not collectible. But ironically, that decision ended up making these coins even more interesting to collectors decades later. By 1967, production was running at full speed. The Philadelphia Mint, which normally didn't use a mint mark anyway, struck over 1.7 billion pennies. The Denver and San Francisco facilities also struck cents, but without identifying letters. All of them look the same. And that makes 1967 one of the few years where collectors can't tell where a coin was made just by looking at it. Now let's talk about what this penny is made of. The 1967 Lincoln cent is composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc. The classic bronze alloy used for decades before the mint switched to copper-plated zinc in the early 1980s. This means the 1967 penny has a warm, reddish tone when freshly minted, and when preserved well, it can still glow with that deep copper color today. It weighs 3.11 grams, has a diameter of 19 millimeters, and features the long-running Lincoln portrait designed by Victor David Brenner. If you look closely at the front, you'll see the words "In God We Trust" above Lincoln's head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date to the right. On the reverse, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, with the tiny seated statue of Lincoln visible between the columns if your eyesight is sharp enough. Above the building are the words United States of America, and below it, 1 cent. Simple, clean, familiar. But here's where things get interesting. Even though most 1967 pennies are worth only face value, certain versions and errors have turned ordinary coins into collector favorites, and in rare cases, into four-figure surprises. One of the most sought-after varieties from 1967 is the double die obverse. This occurs when the die used to strike the coin shifts slightly during production, causing parts of the design, especially the date and lettering, to appear doubled. On some 1967 cents, collectors have found noticeable doubling in the words "In God We Trust" and the date itself. Another prized error is the off-center strike. These coins were struck when the planchet wasn't positioned correctly in the press, causing part of the design to be missing. The more dramatic the off-center strike, the more desirable the coin becomes, especially if the date is still visible. Then there are clipped planchets, where a curved section of the coin is missing due to a metal cutting error during blank preparation. These errors aren't common, and when found on older copper cents like the 1967, they can command strong premiums. But perhaps the most valuable examples of this coin aren't errors at all. They're simply perfect. Coins graded M-67 red or higher, meaning they show no wear, no damage, and full original copper luster, are extremely difficult to find. Even though billions were struck, most entered circulation immediately and picked up scratches, dulling, and small marks. Finding one today that looks exactly like it did in 1967 is rare, and that rarity is where the real value begins. Let's talk about real-world prices. A typical circulated 1967 penny is worth exactly 1 cent. Even uncirculated examples in average condition usually sell for just a few cents to a dollar. But high-grade specimens tell a different story. A 1967 Lincoln cent graded M-67 red by a top grading service has sold at auction for over $1,000. And examples graded M-67 plus red have pushed even higher, sometimes approaching or exceeding $2,000 depending on market demand and eye appeal. Double die varieties, depending on strength and condition, can sell anywhere from $50 to several $100s. Dramatic off-center strikes with full dates have reached similar levels, and rare error combinations, such as clipped planchets with strong luster, can cross into the high hundreds. So while most 1967 pennies are common, a small number have quietly become high-value collector pieces hiding in plain sight. Now the question is, how do you know if yours is real and whether it might be special? First, look at the date. A genuine 1967 penny will have smooth, consistent lettering and numbers with no signs of tampering or reshaping. The font should match known Lincoln cent designs from the 1960s. Next, check the color and weight. A real 1967 cent should weigh about 3.11 grams and have a solid copper tone, not a silvery or lightweight feel. If it sticks to a magnet, something is wrong. These coins are not magnetic. Look closely at the lettering and date with a magnifying glass. If you see doubling that looks clean and rounded, not flat or blurry, you may be looking at a genuine double die. Machine doubling, which is very common, looks flat and shelf-like and usually adds little value. Also inspect the edge and shape. Genuine errors like off-center strikes and clipped planchets will still show normal mint characteristics, such as consistent metal flow and proper design depth. Fakes often look rough, uneven, or artificially altered. And remember, the most valuable examples are those in exceptional condition. Even a perfectly normal 1967 penny could be worth hundreds or more if it's flawless and retains full red luster. Now let's talk about some surprising facts that make this coin even more interesting. First, 1967 is one of only 3 years in modern US history where no circulating coins carried mint marks. The other 2 years are 1965 and 1966. That means collectors today can't tell where a 1967 penny was struck, a mystery baked into every coin from that year. Second, because collectors were discouraged from saving coins during this period, far fewer high-grade specimens were preserved. That's why top condition 1967 cents are far scarcer today than their massive mintages suggest. Third, the Lincoln Memorial Reverse, which many people grew up seeing, quietly hides a second portrait of Lincoln. If you look between the columns, you can actually see the statue of Lincoln seated inside the building. This makes the Lincoln cent one of the few US coins to feature the same person twice on the same side. And here's another fun detail. Many people assume that older always means more valuable, but with coins like the 1967 penny, condition matters far more than age. A worn 1909 penny might be worth less than a flawless 1967 example, and that surprises almost everyone who enters the hobby. So why do collectors love this coin today? Because it represents a turning point in American money. The 1967 Lincoln cent comes from the final years of classic copper pennies. Just 15 years later, the mint would switch to copper-plated zinc, forever changing the feel, sound, and weight of the cent. For many collectors, the 1960s cents represent the end of an era, solid, heavy, richly colored coins that feel substantial in the hand. Collectors also love the challenge this coin presents. Since mint marks were removed, assembling a complete set of top-grade examples becomes more about condition and variety than location. Finding a perfect 1967 cent isn't about geography. It's about patience, searching, and a sharp eye. And then there's the thrill of discovery. Every year, collectors still find high-grade examples in old rolls, collections, and inherited jars that haven't been searched in decades. Some people have pulled coins worth hundreds of dollars from rolls that cost just $50 from the bank. And yes, it still happens, quietly, unexpectedly, and sometimes life-changing for those who know what to look for. That's what makes the 1967 penny so special. It doesn't scream rare. It doesn't look expensive. It doesn't stand out. But it carries history, mystery, and the possibility that something small and overlooked might be far more valuable than anyone realized. And that brings us to the bigger picture. Coins like the 1967 Lincoln cent remind us that everyday objects can hold hidden stories. A penny you've had in your pocket, your car cup holder, or a dusty jar in the closet might be worth exactly 1 cent. Or it might be worth hundreds, even thousands, depending on what's hiding in its details. And the only way to know is to look. So the next time you come across a 1967 penny, don't toss it aside. Turn it over, tilt it in the light. Look closely at the date, the lettering, the surface, and the color, because sometimes history isn't locked in vaults or museums. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in your hand, waiting to be noticed.